I was working the late-night shift at a small, dimly lit grocery store on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the aisles stretched farther than they seemed during the day, and the fluorescent lights flickered constantly, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Most nights were quiet, just me restocking shelves, sweeping floors, and ringing up a few sleepy customers. But that night was different. I had just finished arranging the frozen foods when I noticed a man standing near the end of the aisle, perfectly still, staring at the vegetables as though memorizing every detail. At first, I thought he was just shopping, but something about him was off. He didn't move, didn't adjust his cart, didn't even blink. When our eyes met briefly, I felt a chill run down my spine. Minutes passed, and he remained in the exact same spot, completely motionless, staring past the produce, as though he wasn't looking at me, but something behind me. I tried to ignore him and went back to my work, convincing myself I was just tired, but the feeling of being watched grew heavier with each passing second. As I moved down the aisle to restock canned goods, I heard it. The faintest shuffle of shoes, slow and deliberate, echoing from the next aisle over. My heart started pounding. I called out, "Can I help you find something?" And the man slowly turned his head toward me. But his eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on an empty aisle behind me, as if following something invisible. My stomach twisted. I spun around expecting to see someone, anyone, but the aisle was completely empty. I tried to laugh it off as nerves, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Every time I moved, I felt his gaze follow me, cold and unrelenting, a weight pressing against my back that made it hard to breathe. Then the man began to move, slowly, deliberately. He walked down the aisle, keeping a distance, but always angled toward me, never once leaving my sight. My pulse raced, and I found myself clutching a can of soup like a weapon, telling myself I was imagining it. He passed the snack aisle, the frozen section, the dairy cases, and I could hear the faintest whisper, a sound I couldn't understand, as if he were speaking to someone invisible. The store was completely empty, yet I could feel the air thicken, like the walls themselves were closing in. I tried to follow him with my eyes, but every time I looked back, he was always just out of reach, lingering in the shadows. And every time I blinked, he seemed closer. Finally, he reached the front of the store, near the exit, and paused, turning slowly toward me again. He smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and whispered something so soft I couldn't hear it, but I felt it in my chest, like a warning. Then he vanished. I ran to the entrance, expecting the door to be open, but the parking lot was empty. Panicked, I rushed to the security office to check the cameras. My hands shook as I fast-forwarded the footage, but it showed nothing unusual. No man, no lingering gaze, no whispering, no movement at all. It was as if he had never been there. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my apartment sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of a streetlight outside reminded me of his eyes, fixed on me, watching from the shadows. I returned to the store the next day, trying to convince myself it was just a hallucination brought on by exhaustion, but the feeling didn't leave. Whenever I walk past the frozen foods now, months later, I still get chills, and sometimes, just out of the corner of my eye, I swear I see a shadow lingering at the end of the aisle, watching, waiting, as if he never left, as if he's still inside the store, patient, silent, and unseen. It was a quiet Tuesday night, and I was closing up the small grocery store where I worked, the kind of place that always felt a little off after dark, with aisles that seemed narrower and longer than they did during the day, and fluorescent lights that flickered inconsistently, casting long shadows across the shelves, and I had already locked the main doors, intending to finish the paperwork when I heard the first strange noise, a soft tapping from the produce aisle, like fingernails lightly drumming on a metal shelf, and when I turned to look, there was no one there, but the sound repeated, slow, deliberate, following me as I walked toward it, growing louder as I approached the aisle, and I swear I felt a pressure in the air, like something invisible was pressing against my back, watching me with intent. I told myself it was the pipes, the floorboards, my imagination, and kept moving, but then I heard a whisper, faint at first, but unmistakable. A voice that seemed to say my name, low and breathy, coming from between the rows of canned goods. And I froze, my hands shaking, scanning the aisle, but no one was there, just the shelves, stacked neatly, and the flickering lights above. And yet, I felt it, eyes on me, following, lingering, as though someone, or something, was hidden just behind the edge of my vision, smiling. I tried to ignore it, thinking if I just focused on my work, it would go away. But the noises continued, the shuffle of footsteps that didn't match mine, soft whispers that seemed to echo from the corners of the store, and then a shadow flitted across the end of the aisle, too fast to be a person, but too deliberate to be my imagination. And I spun around, heart hammering, expecting to see someone there, but the aisle was empty. I could feel my pulse in my ears, cold sweat running down my back, and I began to notice the little things I had ignored before. An empty shopping cart that wasn't there a moment ago. Items shifted on the shelves in patterns I couldn't explain. A stale, metallic smell in the air that made my stomach twist. And the whispers grew louder, almost urgent, echoing just beyond comprehension, as if something was trying to communicate with me. Then I saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the store, near the frozen food section. Tall, motionless, with eyes that seemed impossibly dark and fixed on me. I blinked, and it was gone. But every time I looked down another aisle, I thought I saw it again, lurking just out of reach, vanishing when I approached. Panic set in, and I ran to the front of the store, checking the doors. They were locked as usual. But when I glanced back, I could swear I saw the same figure standing behind the cash register, perfectly still, smiling faintly, and my stomach dropped. I fumbled with the security cameras, trying to catch it on tape, but the monitors showed nothing unusual, only empty aisles and flickering lights, and yet I knew what I had seen. The next few nights, the store felt different. Even when I was alone, I could hear soft footsteps echoing behind me, whispers brushing past my ears, cold drafts flowing from empty corners, and items on the shelves slowly shifting positions, as if guided by unseen hands. I quit that job within the week. Even now, months later, whenever I pass a grocery store late at night, I feel the same weight on my back, the same eyes watching me from the shadows, and I know that whatever was in that store wasn't human, wasn't real in any normal sense, but it waited, patient and silent, for someone alone to notice it, to follow it with their eyes, and I am certain that if I had stayed longer, it would have followed me home, because some things that linger in grocery store aisles after dark never leave. I was working the overnight shift at a small, nearly empty grocery store when I first noticed something that made my skin crawl, the kind of subtle unease that grows into full-blown terror. And it started with the sound of the ice machine humming oddly, a low, uneven vibration that seemed to pulse through the floorboards. And when I walked toward it to check, I saw a shadow flicker across the end of the aisle, quick and deliberate, though the cameras above showed nothing. At first, I told myself it was my imagination, fatigue, or the fluorescent lights flickering. But then, I began noticing small things I couldn't explain. Shelves rearranged slightly after I had just organized them. A jar of pickles rolling off the shelf on its own. Faint whispers echoing down the empty aisles, almost as if someone was walking just behind me, breathing into my ear. And when I turned around, there was never anyone there. Only the endless shelves and the humming lights overhead. One particular night, around 2 a.m., I was stacking cans in the cereal aisle when I saw a figure at the far end of the store, standing completely still. A man, or something shaped like a man, staring directly at me, and though I blinked and looked again, it didn't move, it didn't disappear, and I could feel the weight of its gaze pressing into me, making my legs weak, my heart hammering, and I realized with a sickening clarity that whatever it wasn't human. It moved too silently, and its presence felt wrong, like the air itself recoiled around it. I tried to distract myself by finishing my tasks and heading toward the break room, but as I passed the refrigerated section, I heard whispers calling my name, soft, deliberate, coming from every corner at once, and when I glanced into the freezer reflection, I saw a pale face peering at me from behind the shelves, eyes completely black, lips moving in a silent grin, and I stumbled back, almost dropping the box of cans in my hands. But when I spun around, nothing was there. The remainder of the night was a nightmare. Every time I turned down an aisle, I felt eyes on my back. Shelves seemed to shift as though they were breathing, and distant footsteps echoed in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. And when I finally tried to leave, the automatic doors opened and closed by themselves repeatedly, as if mocking me, refusing to let me escape. And even when I eventually made it to my car in the empty parking lot, I felt as if the store itself was alive, watching me, waiting for the next time I would return. Because some places, especially empty grocery stores after midnight, hold something that lingers in the shadows, patient, silent, and always observing. And even now, weeks later, I can't walk past a grocery store at night without feeling the same icy weight, the same invisible eyes following me. And I know with terrifying certainty that whatever I encountered on that overnight shift never truly left.